wonderful learners. Welcome back to P.O.D official channel. Today we are going to learn something important, so I want you to take your notepad and then your pen. My name is Desmond Amwa and I'm going to take you through this wonderful lesson. So stay with us to the end of this video. So let's talk about the formation of ions. So before we go into the formation of ions, let's do some small revisions on the subatomic particles. So the subatomic particles of an atom, we have the protons, which are positively charged. We have the electrons, which has negative charges. We also have the neutron that has no charge, so zero charge. So every atom has equal number of protons and equal number of electrons, and since their charges are opposite, they cancel out, making the atom electrically neutral. So for an atom to gain a charge to form an ion, it has to lose or gain electrons. Alright, so an ion is formed when an atom or group of atoms gain or loses an electron to become electrically charged. So let's see why an atom has, the reason why an atom has to lose or gain electron. So from the shells, we saw that the K shell takes a maximum of 2 electrons, the L shell takes a maximum of 8 electrons, the M shell takes a maximum of 8 electrons, and then the N shell, which also take 8 electrons for it to be stable. So this one is the doublet rule. So when you are drawing the electronic configuration and then the first shell is having 2 electrons, means that it is stable. And if it is having 8, the L shell is having 8 electrons, means that it is stable. So for us to understand how an atom forms an ion, let's look at sodium atom. So with the sodium atom, the first shell takes 2 electrons. The second shell takes 8 electrons. And then the last shall take 1 electrons. So from the rule, from here, you see the maximum number of electrons for the M shell is 8, but here we have only 1. So whenever you have this, any atom that has this number of electrons from 0 to 4, right? If the number of electrons ranges from 0 to 4, means that the atom is going to lose electron. But if it is ranges from 5 to 7, means that it's going to gain electron. So this one will lose, this one will gain. Alright, so in the outermost shell, this atom will lose this electron. So the electronic configuration of sodium is 2, 8, 1. So it will lose this electron for it to be stable. So we will have the sodium atom, which is 2, 8. The plus here tells you that sodium has lost one electron, the plus here. So when an atom loses an electron, it forms cation. So cation is an ion that carries a positive charge. The reason why it carries a positive charge is that the number of protons is higher than the number of what? Electrons. So making the atom positively charged. So that's for sodium. So let's look at another element. So we will take chlorine. Chlorine is atomic number 17. So let's draw the chlorine atom. So the first shell will take 2 electrons. The second shell will take 8. Then the last shell, so we have 10 electrons here, so left with 7 electrons. Then the last electron. So the rule says that the first shell takes 2 electrons, the second shell takes 8 electrons, and then the last shell has to take, the M shell has to take 8 electrons. But from here, it is taking what? 7 electrons. And you can see it is not stable. So for it to respect this rule, we look at the range. So from 0 to 4, it has to lose. From 5 to 7, it has to gain. So we are in this range. So this atom is going to gain 1 electron for it to be stable. So when it gains 1 electron, means that the number of electrons will be higher than the number of protons, which is positive charge. So when it gains more electrons than protons, it becomes what? Negatively charged. So the electronic configuration of chlorine is 17. So we are going to have 8 electronic configuration, 2, 8, 7. So when it gains 1 electron, it becomes negative. So we have 2, 8, 8. So this tells you that the chlorine atom has gained 1 extra electrons, making the number of protons higher than the number of electrons. So in this case, we say an ion is formed. So an anion is an ion that carries a negative charge. An anion is an ion that carries a negative charge. So this is how ions are formed. So let me summarize this one. So we have 2 types of ions here. So we have cation and then an anion. So cation. So a cation is a positively charged ion. So a cation is an ion that carries a positive charge. Why? Because the number of electrons is higher than the number of protons. And then an anion is an ion that carries a negative charge. Why? Because the number of electrons is higher than the number of protons, so it will have a negative charge. So that is the formation of ions. So from what we have learned, let's use that one to write the electronic configuration and then also find the valency and then the charge of these elements. Alright, so the first one is lithium. So the atomic number of lithium is 3. So we have the first shell taking 2, then left with 1, then the 1. So from here, we can just find the valency electron, that is 1. So the charge, let's look at the charge. So for lithium to be stable, it needs 8 electrons in its second shell. But here the second shell is taking what? 1. So means that it has to lose this electron. So when it loses 1 electron, it becomes what? A positive charge. So the charge of lithium is +1. Alright, let's go to beryllium. Alright, so beryllium is atomic number 4. So means have 4 protons. So means that the electrons will be 4. So the first shell will take 2 electrons, and then the second shell will also take 2 electrons. But from the rule, we know that the first shell takes what? 2 electrons, and then the second shell is supposed to take 8 electrons for it to be stable. So since it is not stable, it will lose these 2 electrons for it to be stable. So when it loses 2 electrons, we know that the last shell is taking 2 electrons. So the valency will be 2. So it will lose these 2 electrons for it to form a positive ion. The next one, magnesium. Magnesium is atomic number 12. Okay, so it will take 2 electrons in its first shell, then 8 electrons in the second shell, making 10. Then 2 electrons in the last shell. Why? Because it's having 12 protons. So if it is taking 2 electrons here and also 8 electrons, it will be left with 2 in the last shell. So in the last shell, we have 2 electrons, so the valency will be 2. And since it is not stable, because the third shell has to take a maximum of 8 electrons for it to be stable, but here it is taking 2, so it will lose these 2 electrons to form a positive ion. The next one is calcium. So calcium is atomic number 20. So the first shell will take 2, the second shell will take 8, and then the last shell, the third shell will take 8. The last shell will take 2. Remember, the last shell has to follow the octet rule. It has to take 8 electrons. So since it is not respecting the octet rule, therefore it has to lose this electron. And this electron is located in the outermost shell. So the valency will be 2, and then the charge will be +2. Then we have aluminium. Aluminium is atomic number 13. So it has 13 electrons. So the first shell will take 2, the second shell will take 8, and then the last shell, which is the third shell, is going to take 3 electrons. Remember, the third shell takes a maximum of 8 electrons. So since it is not respecting the octet rule, it will lose these 3 electrons to form a +3 ion. And since this is located in the outermost shell, the valency is 3. Alright, so that is the arrangement here. So I hope you understand this part. So the lithium ion is carrying +1 charge, beryllium is having +2 charge, magnesium is +2, calcium is +2, and aluminium is +2. So when you are writing this, it will be lithium plus beryllium is 2 plus. We have magnesium, we have 2 plus. We have calcium 2 plus, then we have aluminium 3 plus. So this is how we represent the charges on the atom. Alright, so let's look at elements that gains electron to form anions. Alright, so let's look at this one, fluorine. Let's look at its electronic configuration. So electronic configuration of fluorine. So fluorine is atomic number 9, so it has 9 electrons in its shell. So we have the first shell will take 2, the second shell is going to take 8, and then so the second shell is going to take 7, sorry. So that's it. But look at this place. In the rule we said that the L shell takes 2, the K shell takes 2, the L shell takes 8, and then M shell takes 8. But here you can see that the L shell is taking 7. And we saw that if the number of electrons is from 5 to 7, it will rather gain electron. So here the charge will be -1. Why? Because it will gain 1 electron. So when it gains electron, it is what? Negative. And then the valency is the charge that it will gain for it to be stable. So the valency will be 1. So you have to understand the differences between the valency for cations and then the valency for anions. Next one, let's look at chlorine. So the first shell, it will take 2 electrons. The second shell, it will take 8 electrons. And then the last shell, it will take 7 electrons. Mind you, the third shell always take a maximum of 8 electrons for it to be stable. So we can see from here that chlorine is not stable. So what will happen? It will gain 1 electron for it to be stable because of this range. So the charge will be -1. So therefore the valency is 1. Let's look at oxygen. Oxygen is atomic number 8, so it will take 8 electrons in its shell. So the first shell takes 2, then the second shell will take 6. Remember, the second shell takes what? 8 electrons, but here it is taking 6, so it is not stable. So looking at this range means that it will gain electrons. So how many electrons will it gain for it to be stable? So it will gain 2 electrons. So it will be -2. So means that the valency is 2. Then let's look at sulfur. The atomic number for sulfur is 16. So the first one, it will take 2 electrons. The second one, 8. And then the next one, 6. So looking at the rules, the first will take 2, a maximum of 2. The second shell will take a maximum of 8. And then the last one is supposed to take a maximum of 8. So means it has to gain electrons. So following this range, it will gain 2 electrons. So we have the valency to be 2. Then we have nitrogen. So nitrogen is the 7th element. So it has 7 electrons. So we have the first one will take a maximum of 2 electrons. And then the next one will take 5. But the rules, the second shell always take 8. So it means that the nitrogen atom is not stable. So it needs 3 extra electrons. So it means following this rule, it will gain 3 electrons. So it means the charge is -3. And then the valency will be 3. So this is how we represent them. So fluorine, that's -1, and then chlorine, that's also -1. We also have oxygen. Oxygen, that's -2, and then we have sulfur, that one to -2, and then we have nitrogen, that's -3. Alright, so now we know how cations and anions are formed. We also know, you have to also know how to mention the ions. So this one is lithium ion, beryllium ion, magnesium ion, calcium ion, aluminium ion. So for the anions, fluorine will be fluoride. So fluoride ion, chlorine will be chloride, oxygen will be oxide, sulfur will be sulfide, and nitrogen will be nitrate. So that is the formation of ions. Mind you, ions are classified based on one, the type of charges they carry. So cations and anions. And then the second one talks about the number of atoms in the ion. So we have monoatomic ions and then polyatomic ions. So the monoatomic ions normally have only one atom in the ion, and then the polyatomic ions have more than 2 atoms that combine to form the ion. So this is the end of this lesson, and I want you to try this work for me. So explain why helium, neon, and argon are stable elements. So I want you to try this work and put the answer at the comment section. I will check and give you a feedback. Thank you. Make sure you like the video, you subscribe to the channel if you have not. We will meet next time. Bye bye.